Hi, Part 2s. It's Monday, October 26th, and we're coming to the end of Module 3, our module on faith formation. And on Wednesday, October 28th, we're starting our next module, which is morality and ethics. And so we're entering into a really heavy topic and something that really needs to be taken with incredible openness, and we really need to work on this in terms of people of faith, because this is where sort of all the controversy comes in, right? Scripture is hard. There's a lot to dissect. We'll get to that at the end of the unit. At the end of the course. But morality and ethics is something that really can divide us, and it does divide us as a society, as a church. And as we see, our society is really rapidly developing into a very secular society. We're multi-faith, we're multicultural. Like as we globalize, so to speak, we become one big, family, or one big world, in a sense where there was a time where before there was globalization, before there was travel, before there was internet, we were pretty much insular in our culture, in our communities, and sort of like stayed with like. Right? So when you look at the development even of Canada, or of where we are in Ontario, it was very distinct in terms of culture and faith. But then as we grew as a world and had access, things changed. So we need to approach our faith as a globalized, so to speak, world and church. So many people say, oh, the church is, it's behind the times. It's, it's not, meeting my needs, la, 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 la. True. In many ways. However, we really need to look at the fact that the church is a world institution. It's not just in Canada. It's not just in Ontario. It's not just in the GTA or wherever you are. It meets the needs of the global church. So the North American church has different needs than the Asian church, than the European church, than the Latin American church, than the African church, and I can go on and on and on. Even within our own country, there's different needs. Even within Ontario, the church in Toronto has very different needs than the church in Northern Ontario, right? So we really need to look at this and kind of be patient with the church and trust that God has a plan, right? And so I always use the example of Vatican II, right? So prior to Vatican II, our church was so different, right? Like architecturally, the churches were very like straight. There were the pews, the rows right behind each other, and the altar was turned around. The priest celebrated Mass with his back to the people, because it was the idea that the priest was offering the Mass up to God, on behalf of the people, right? And there was the communion rail, and it was very segregated from the holy and the secular or the lay people, right? Women weren't allowed to partake in anything. Okay, so you got the idea. It was a very different church. And at the time that John 23rd was elected as Pope, it was a time in church history where they just kind of needed a sort of a Pope just to kind of tie things over for now, right? In terms of clear leadership emerging from the cardinals. And John 23rd seemed to be the right candidate at the time because, he wasn't too outspoken and he wasn't too healthy. I know that sounds bad, but anyways. And what took everyone by surprise is John 23rd started Vatican Council II. Vatican Council II, we got this big document. It is the most recent meeting of the church, most recent council of the church. I think there's been like 20-something councils since the beginning, since the actual first council, which it was really technically between Peter and Paul. No, it wasn't. It was, Peter and Paul, arguing whether to go to the Gentiles or not. So I wrote little notes here, because just in case I forget. Anyways, and there have been, Other significant councils like Trent dealt with Reformation, and then Vatican II dealt with the church, quote unquote, the church, meaning us, not just the building. It included the laity for the first time, dealt with the laity. We're all called to holiness. In our baptism, we're all called to the priesthood. We're not ordained priests, but we're all called to the priesthood, right? And, and if we look at the ratio of the church, the hierarchy versus the laity, it's 43 to 100,000. So 43 hierarchy, 100,000 laity. That would be the ratio if we looked at this mathematically, right? So the laity, us, have a great part to play in this church. And because of the Vatican Council in 63 to 65, and unfortunately John 23rd didn't live to see the end of the council, but he started it. He literally flipped the church around. Like architecturally, churches started to become more, circular, not so, narrow and tall, but kind of, architecturally bring in community. The altar rails went down. The altar turned around. We started to see more women participation outside of, sisters and nuns. If it wasn't for Vatican Council II, I would have never got my master's in religious ed, especially at the Faculty of Theology at St. Mike's at U of T, right? Like there's no way that would have been an option for me, right? So big changes. So we as the laity need to accept our identity as church. That we are this part of our organization, and we are the church. Church is not someone else or somewhere else. Like right here is church, in you, in me, and we got to get that definition. We need to kind of change the way we think about what church is. Okay. So as we approach this, as Catholic educators, you guys probably are more church than some of these kids will ever see, right? And I think I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it. Your classrooms become sacred. They're, the only time they might be going to mass if it's a school mass, right? And so, we really, with this gift of Catholic education, we've got so many young people at our, listening to us, that we can model, that we can teach, that we can keep the church going, and to inspire them to take ownership of being church as our society grows and changes, right? But we need to be patient. So John 23rd threw the church for a big surprise. We just never know where the Spirit is going to lead the church. Pope Francis was a bit of a surprise to the church, because we went from really conservative John Paul II, for 25 years of a very conservative church, to Pope Benedict, who just, along the same vein, because he was worked very closely with Pope John Paul II, and then just like mysteriously he, retired. That's almost unheard of. I think there's only one other pope in the history of the church that retired from being pope. And then we get this complete opposite, Pope Francis, which really has unnerved so many people in this church, and they almost think he is almost unorthodox, right? And so again, just like Vatican II, we don't know where the Spirit is leading the church. That's why I have a hard time when people, will say, well, I don't like Pope Francis, but I'm going to follow the teachings of John Paul II. Well, we're cherry picking in a church, right? Which pope suits our needs better? Which pope, speaks to us better? No. The Pope du jour, the Pope of the day, the Pope that is currently leading the church has been chosen by the Spirit to lead the church in the direction it needs to go. So personally, I was not a big fan of Pope Benedict. Nice man. I got a chance to see him at Casa Gandolfo in his summer residence, not personally, but part of the viewing on one of our summer courses when I took the teachers for a course. And it's just like, he just seemed like such a nice man. Like I really softened towards him and saw his frailty, right? And but I personally just didn't agree with his theology. But did I badmouth him? Did I walk away from the church? Did I say, well, I'll only be loyal to Pope John Paul II, who was my idea of who a pope was, because that's who I grew up with, right? Plus he was Polish, because I'm Polish. No, but no, instead of feeling like, oh, I don't want to go see Pope Benedict, I just, no, it was nice to get that experience and to see the value of what he was to our church. So we have a lot to learn as the greater church, as the lay church. And when reading your posts, a lot of people, including us, the kids, us, the parents, we're struggling with how the value of church for us. Me personally, and this is why I can teach these courses, is because I can authentically say I still love the Mass. I really do. I understand why some people wouldn't, but I still like the Mass. In fact, there's times I love the Mass. Because for me, Mass is about Eucharist. And Eucharist is about being fed and being healed and having that connection with my God in a way that is not possible outside of the church. So for me, there's great value in going to Mass, even if I might not agree with the priest, even though the priest might have boring homilies or blah, 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 whatever the issue is. We have so many issues. I go for the experience of Eucharist, right? And that experience of peace for 1 hour, just to be at peace and to kind of shut down from everything else outside of that world. And to connect with a community that's in support of my own humanity and my flaws. And that I can come out of there being a better person. And to be forgiven. Wow. That's loaded, right? When we get to sacraments, I'll talk about that. So I digress. No, I don't. There's so much preamble, but let's talk about morality and conscience, because that's where I started with this long, intro, so to speak. And I did focus on Pope Francis because I just read some background information as to what he said about his support of same-sex civil unions. And it's interesting because we struggle with homosexuality, and that's one of the big things that divides the people within our church, is the fact that people feel that the church does not accept homosexuality. And in some ways, yeah, it doesn't, but in a lot of ways it does. And part of our teachings, I'm going to go through this with you guys so you understand, because this is huge for our schools. Before I retired as chaplain, in the last couple of years, things just seem to change very quickly in terms of kids transitioning. All of a sudden, transitioning took off, so to speak, in our culture, in our world, and it was starting to happen in our schools, and it's happening more and more. So it just added another dimension to our LGBTQ plus community and what we need to deal with in our schools, and that fact we have to be accepting, and the fact that we are Catholic schools, right? So I remember when I started teaching, the teacher that was in charge of the support group for students that were gay and homosexual at that time, I don't think we called it LGBTQ at that time, they actually had to meet off site. They were not allowed to meet at the school. So this teacher found a place in the neighborhood that she could meet with these children and these students and offer a support group. Now we're pretty much mandated in every school to have a support group for our LGBTQ plus community for our students, and that was one of the things I was involved in as chaplain, and it was just such an eye-opener. I learned so much from those students, because unless that's your lived experience, it's hard to understand. And the more you listen to those students, the more you listen to people who are, that is their reality, then you can develop a sense of empathy and understanding, just like it's really, I don't know, is it hard to understand the plight of the white woman, in the Western world. Like, I don't have much, you know, hardship in that respect in terms of being accepted and given opportunities, right? So we need to get into each other's stories and to really understand. So the moral teachings of the church gives us boundaries. And if you think about it, we as human beings need laws and regulations. I'm sorry. Anytime, we are given complete freedom, it's a disaster. Okay? Because human nature is human nature since the beginning of time. We need to know how far we can go. Even the best person with the best intentions needs to know, how far can I go? And then make a decision, will I stop at that, right? Because then there's a continued decision-making process. Well, what about this time, right? Well, can I get away with it, right? And then we have excuses. So there's no such thing as a country, as an organization, as a family, as a classroom that does not have rules, either stated, written, or implied. And there's no group, organization, family, etc. that doesn't have consequences for those rules that are not followed. Whether they're obvious and they're imposed those consequences, or whether in the construct of the group things start to fall apart because those are the consequences of decision making, right? So the church is no different, right? And so yeah, we can argue that some of these rules don't apply to us today. Yeah, we've changed as a society, absolutely. And is the church going to change as fast as we're changing? No, the church doesn't change as fast as we do. Why? Because the foundational principle of the church's moral teachings is based on the dignity of human life. And you guys are going to do that in one of your posts, and it's going to ask you to go to number 1700 in the Catechism, and it's going to define for you the dignity of the human person. So whether you have the actual catechism, okay, it's not done by pages, it's numbered by articles, okay, so it's 1700, or you're going to go to the webs, you're going to Google it, and you're going to read 1700, the dignity of human life, and what does the church teach, right? And so this is the foundation, because everything the church teaches, everything it speaks up for, is going to be based on, is the dignity of human life being violated in any way, right? So this is how the church reasons, and it's a pretty good way to reason, right? So so when we want things to go faster, the church is going to say, well, wait a second, we need to make sure that the dignity of human life is going to be protected. So let's switch over for a second to the secular culture that is based on profit and speed, right? And I always use the example of the pharmaceutical companies, and this is really timely because we're listening to about the development of vaccines out there. And prior to the pandemic, I used to always use this as an example. So I'm not just using it because there's a pandemic, but I always used to say, pharmaceutical companies will try to get drugs on the market as fast as they can. They will go through the required amount of testing to be approved, but it's never 100%. They're going to try to speed it through as fast as they can. So they're making crazy amounts of money on medicine that they put out there. Factoring in, there's going to be huge lawsuits. Because somewhere with any pharmaceutical, there's some side effect, there's something will happen where some people will get terribly ill or even die. And pharmaceutical companies have to factor in, they're going to be in the court. They're probably always in the courts anyways. There's probably always lawsuits, right? So, and I always kind of think about, the US stations when you watch, and there's, Celino and Barnes, or whatever you hear, those American law firms. And did you ever take drug XYZ, or and did you get la 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 la, or did someone take this and die? Well, we can get you this much money in a settlement. And yeah, I don't want that money. I want my life. I want that person back. I don't want to have these side effects, right? But the church is not like that. The church goes into research, and and so many people say, oh, church and science don't meet. Yes, they do. The church has scientists, lawyers, doctors, researchers. They have people in every aspect of secular culture. I used to bring in a Jesuit priest into my class to speak to my grade 12s, and his name was Father Rob Allure. Is Father Rob Allure? He's still around. And at the time, I don't think he's there now, but he used to work at Mount Sinai Hospital working on the genome as a researcher. Yet he was is a Jesuit priest, right? So someone would say, well, no, that doesn't, work. He's a priest. How could he be a scientist? No. The church does incredible research, and it has such an educated, intellectual, massive pool of people that are part of the church and active in society doing all kinds of research, right? So the church hesitates because it's not like Apple where the next model is going to come out next September. You're getting another model. You think about it like this. I don't know when the last time the catechism was updated, but Vatican Council II, we think, 63 to 65, that was so long ago. I was born in 63, by the way. I'm a Vatican II baby. This is still not completely realized in our society. We're still struggling. They're very, they're the very strong conservatives in the church really dislike Vatican II. They like to see it go away. Right? Because Vatican II allowed us to think. Vatican II told us to start reading scripture, whereas before we didn't. Vatican II is telling us to get an informed conscience. So the process of being Catholic, it's so different from some of the other Christian churches because we're allowed to think. Okay, so despite what anybody else is going to tell you, and there are certain even priests in our churches that may not align themselves with this, but this is what the church teaches. The church teaches us that we have to have an informed conscience, that when we go through a process of search, so you're going to be reading an article that's going to talk about listen, steps to doing that search. We take ownership for our decision making. Yes, the church has really important, rules, doctrine, right, that we should follow, right? And a lot of it is good. I'm going to tell you, if I had more time to talk to you guys about this, I would tell you that what they advocate is really good. But we need to take it as that process of search. And does it fit into my life? Does it fit for what I need to do? So the church is going to say, okay, you got to make a big decision. Have you, done the research? Have you read about what the church teaches? Not get it from somebody else. Did you read about it? Did you pick this up and read? What does the church actually teach about the thing I'm trying to decide? Right? Have you talked to your family? Have you prayed about it? Have you talked to your local priest? Right? I remember friends of a friend, they were trying to get pregnant and couldn't and wanted to go through in vitro, and they struggled with it. And part of their process of search, they were very strong Catholics, but part of their process of search was to go speak to their priest and help them in that decision-making process. And but eventually they made the choice to have this child to do that, right? So in the Catechism in 1782, right, it says man has the right to act in conscience and in freedom so as personally to make moral decisions. He must not be forced to act contrary to his conscience, nor must he be prevented from acting according to his conscience, especially in religious matters. So the church, in the bottom line says, the church tells us that the final decision is ours. But when we do this, we're better equipped to deal with the outcome of the decision, right? So prior to Vatican II, we didn't educate ourselves really. And so the whole decision-making process was either as right or wrong. And then, there were consequences. With Vatican II, there's sort of this middle, sort of almost like a gray area. People don't like gray areas. But then we're able to kind of like, okay, is this, what if I do this? What if I don't? Well, my decision is here. I've weighed kind of everything. But you have to be prepared. If it's a great outcome, thank God. But if the outcome is not positive, are you able to deal with the consequences of it? And that's what the previous model didn't do for us. It was either right or wrong. We either, yay, we made it, or B, we get punished. But the whole decision-making process, there was no process. There was no growing into making decisions. With an informed conscience, or the formation of your conscience, you're growing into the responsibility of making important decisions, some small, some greater, right? I always use the example of just even pressing the snooze in the morning, small decision. Who cares? Doesn't impact? But yes, it does, because if you're running late, you're going to be angry at your family, running out the door and ruin their day, and then you're going to make poor decisions along the road. You might go through a red light or a yellow light. You might get into an accident because you pressed the snooze button and you weren't in the frame of mind to make a decision-making process on the road to work. You could have cost someone their life. So there is no small, right? Just lucky if you got to work and you weren't distracted, and in your haste, somehow you're able to make good decisions. But a lot of us don't. That's why there's so many accidents on the road, so to speak. So when we look at, and a lot of people have the issue with dealing with kids in your school about homosexuality, that's going to come up in conversation. And Pope Francis just, again, they don't know if it's they're reading into it or not, because a new movie's coming out, Francesco, and we already know Pope Francis said, who am I to judge in dealing with homosexuality? He was affirming that civil sex, same-sex unions, they have a right to family and security, and but he did not say they have a right to get married in the church yet, because we're far from that still. Like, this is a huge step. If he was not misquoted, because I was doing some research on this to see, did he actually say this? And there's some speculation, it wasn't translated properly, but that door is opening. That door is opening. He may not open that door completely for us as a church. He just might bring us to the door, and then, that key to the door, he just might leave under the mat for the next person, because the church may not be ready right now. God may not be directing him at this time to go that far. We don't know that. We don't know that. But it's interesting, in the Catechism, I think this is really important for everyone to know, what the Catechism talks about. And this is done more in part 3, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this, but I'm just going to say this because a lot of us are dealing with this in our classrooms in terms of kids who are identifying in the LGBTQ plus community, that are transitioning. The hard part about how it is written in the Catechism, in 2357, it talks about homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity. Tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. And the reason for that is because in the teachings of marriage, it's based on unitive and procreative. And because they cannot procreate, that's what makes it difficult. And that's where we're kind of stuck in that definition of marriage. And we've been rooted that for a long time. So it's going to be hard to move away from that, But in 2358, everyone should know this, okay? They do not choose their homosexual condition. For most of them, it is a trial. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. These persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross the difficulties they may encounter from their condition. Not making it up. I highlighted it. It's in the Catechism. Anybody ever tell you that? So it depends, how much. If theology you've taken, or, you know, depending on, I don't know, you might have come across that, but for the most part, a lot of people are not aware of that. Okay. So in this course, we're teaching you to, you know, have a good process of decision making, but also to, you know, understand really what is the church teaching and where are we in the crossroads of our faith now in this church in 2020. In the part 2, we're going to be focusing on social justice. I'm going to be sending you guys some videos from my mission trips to give you some better, you know, understanding if you've never been on a mission trip. With social justice, we're trying to create a just world. Again, based on the dignity of human life, we should all have access to clean water, housing, food. We should all be given the dignity of the opportunity to work for a just wage. And what I'm going to be focusing on, like, how do we get a just wage? We are profiting so much in this Western world from the sweat and labor of people we will never see. Because we are a global church, a global world, you know, we are impacting each other. So every time we purchase something, we've just affected somebody's life we're never going to see. And if that person is working for a company that's exploiting them, we are exploiting them. If we're working for a company that believes in just wage and ethical labor practices, then we're allowing that person to have life. So in my videos that I'm going to show, they're short videos. So I did morning reflections for students in my school when I was in the Dominican Republic. I'm going to share more about that. But I always say, you know, every time you pull out your money, we're not using money, we're using credit cards. But we're in relationship to someone every time we buy a product. So I've got products here like Fair Trade cinnamon, Fair Trade chocolate. I ate it. Coffee. I drank it. But, you know, we got to start reading these labels. And some of these, you know, it says here, Rainforest Alliance certified, it's organic. If it's organic, it's good for the earth and it's good for us, right? I'm used to the Fair Trade label. This one says Fair for Life, non-GMO, organic fair trade. Just looking for the label that I'm used to. Again, Fair for Life. Usually it's better for your health and it's better for the earth. And you know, when you buy something that is fair trade, someone has breathed a little easier because they worked really hard and they got enough money to feed their family and to deal with their basic needs and necessities of life. And as consumer Catholics, we are in relationship economically with people in this world we will never meet, but we impact their life. Do we profit from them, or do we live our life that we live in equity, that we get the resources we need, and in fairness in our decision-making process, someone else has the opportunity to get a decent life for the hard work? That's social justice. It's tough, because every time we go into the store, we have to make decisions. And not all of them are going to be great, because I'm sure I'm wearing clothes right now that were not ethically sourced. And it's tough because then our guilt takes, so we can't live on guilt either. We just got to take baby steps, and every chance we can, we got to make better decisions and take into account other people. And someday, absolutely everything what I'm wearing, hopefully, will be giving someone a just wage. Hopefully someday, everything I will eat and purchase will give everyone a just wage. It starts with small things. You could just start with chocolate and coffee, right? Anyways, it is, I've gone much longer than I wanted to. And then you guys are going to be doing, so some of you guys, I'm going to meet you for video meeting for topic 1. Topic 2 is human dignity. You've got a Dropbox and a discussion post. And then topic 3, social teachings on the church. You're going to be doing like a PowerPoint presentation kind of thing. Please read everything carefully. Make sure you've covered all the requirements. Contact me if you're not sure. Okay, and so it's a bit of a short module, but it's heavy, it's jam-packed, right? And so we need to do it justice. There, and I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to think, oh, I forgot to say this, that, or the other thing, and so I'll have to do some follow-up with you guys. But hopefully in the things I post on the newsfeed, I'll tap into things that I wish I had said now, but again, short for time. So let's read the gospel together. Let's pray. It's Monday, October 26th. There's no feast days. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And peace be with you. Let's hold each other in prayer and everyone who needs our prayers in this world. Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. How dare he? He's breaking a law, you know. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, major violation of a Judaic law, remember Jesus was a Jew, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days in which to work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When Jesus said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. The gospel of the Lord. And this is so perfect as we talk about ethics, because it's all about laws. Are we breaking the law? Are we following the law? Do we change the law? How do we live within the law? And Jesus too also came he really didn't come to start a new religion. He just came to teach us how to live within those laws and how to be in relationship with God and each other. And his primary focus was the dignity of human life. And that's what this story is about. He saw the dignity of that woman, despite the fact it was the Sabbath and he shouldn't be working, he cured her. Pope Francis, is he violating the teachings of the church by his words recently about same-sex union? Let's talk about it. Good luck. Enjoy. This is hopefully amazing learning for you, and I'll see some of you guys on Wednesday or Thursday. Peace.